The grand station of Valora floated in the silence of space like a crown of silver light. It was built long ago as a neutral ground where many species could gather without fear of war or hidden weapons. Its long corridors were filled with banners of every world, glowing symbols that represented peace, unity, and shared knowledge. The upcoming council was the most important meeting in a century, and every major power was present. Among them were the humans. They were newcomers to the stars, but in only a few short decades they had spread across trade routes and distant colonies with speed that surprised many alien races. Some called it boldness. Others called it recklessness. Few had decided yet if humans would become trusted partners or dangerous rivals. Moran stood near the observation deck of the council hall, staring out at the stars. He was young compared to most envoys, barely in his 20s, but he had been chosen because of his sharp mind and calm manner. He was not the leader of the human group, only a junior envoy meant to watch, learn, and speak when asked. Still, he felt the weight of history pressing on his shoulders. The alien representatives moved through the halls in graceful patterns. Tall forms with silver scales, cloaked beings with glowing eyes, and insect-like diplomats whose antennae twitched with every passing voice. Moran's eyes tried to take in every detail. He felt both wonder and fear, for each alien around him represented a civilization far older and stronger than Earth. He knew his task was simple. He only had to listen. But inside him, curiosity burned stronger than caution. The council chambers were prepared with care. At the center, a great circular table stretched wide, large enough for 50 species to sit together. The chairs shifted shape depending on who approached, adapting to wings, tails, or multiple limbs. The air was kept neutral in scent and temperature so no one would feel discomfort. The human leader, a steady man named Doran, gave Moran his instructions again. Stay quiet unless spoken to. Watch carefully. Remember, we are here to learn more than to speak. Moran nodded. I understand. Yet his heart whispered otherwise. He wanted to know more than the surface. He wanted to see what these aliens were like when they were not standing in ceremony. It was then that his eyes noticed her. Across the chamber, moving with quiet dignity, was Tira, the diplomat from the Syrian people. She was tall, her form slender with skin that shimmered faintly like glass touched by moonlight. Her hair, long and flowing, moved like threads of silver as she walked. The Syrians were respected for their wisdom and their strict codes of conduct. Among the alien delegations, their voice often carried great weight. Moran felt something shift inside him. It was not attraction in the simple sense, but a fascination with how different and graceful she appeared. She moved like the calm surface of a deep river. Others gave way when she passed, not out of fear but respect. He told himself not to stare, but his gaze lingered longer than it should have. Hours later, after the first round of speeches ended, the delegates were given time to rest before the private discussions. Moran walked through the station's long hallways, lost in thought. The lights of Valora glowed faintly blue along the walls, casting soft shadows. He wanted to explore, to understand more of this place beyond the formal halls. His feet carried him to a quieter section of the station. The noise of the crowd faded and the air grew still. He saw a door half open, light spilling out from within. At first he thought it was another empty preparation room. He paused, unsure if he should step closer. Curiosity, however, guided him forward. Inside, Tira stood near a tall mirror. She was in the process of changing from her travel attire into her ceremonial robes for the evening session. Her back was turned and she had not noticed him. The robe shimmered with threads of crystal, catching the light like stars woven into cloth. She moved with slow precision, adjusting each part carefully as if it were not just clothing but a symbol of her people's honor. Moran froze, his breath caught. He had not meant to intrude. He knew it would be seen as disrespectful, even offensive, to step into such a private moment. He took a step back, his heart racing, but it was too late. Tira turned, her sharp eyes meeting his. The room grew silent. Her expression was not anger, but something colder, measured, and sharp. She studied him as if weighing his very soul. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came at first. The stillness stretched long enough that Moran felt it pressing on his chest. Finally, her voice, calm yet edged with command, broke the silence. You are the human envoy. Moran swallowed hard. I did not mean to intrude. The door was open. I thought this room was empty. She stepped closer, her robe half-fastened, though she carried herself with no shame. Humans are known for their curiosity. I see it as true. Her tone was not kind, but not furious either. It was more like a test, a judgment waiting to be made. Miran lowered his eyes, struggling for words. I apologize, he said quickly. It was a mistake. I should not have entered. Please forgive me. Her gaze remained fixed on him. Mistake. Or interest. His cheeks burned. I only wish to learn more of this station. Nothing more. I promise. Silence again. She moved back slightly, adjusting her robe with calm hands. Among my people, she said, such a moment would end with punishment. But this is not Syrian ground. Here I will choose differently. Miran's heart leapt with both relief and worry. Thank you. I mean no disrespect, truly. Her silver eyes narrowed as if reading every layer of his mind. For a long breath she said nothing. Then, slowly, she fastened the final clasp of her robe, the light catching on the crystal threads. She looked taller now, almost regal. You will remember this, Tira said. Humans speak often of honesty. We will see if yours is true. She stepped past him without another word, her presence leaving the room colder than before. Miran stood frozen long after she left. His mind raced. He feared he had just damaged not only his own position, but perhaps the reputation of all humans at the council. Yet part of him could not shake the thought that her reaction was not simple offense. There had been curiosity in her eyes, a question unspoken. As he finally turned to leave, he knew one thing clearly. This chance meeting, born of mistake and curiosity, would not be forgotten. Whether it would bring disaster or something else, he could not yet tell. But the course of his role at the council had already changed. The chamber doors slid open as Tira stepped into the grand corridor. The silver threads of her ceremonial robe shimmered faintly in the soft blue lights. She did not look back at Miran, but he felt the weight of her presence even after she vanished around the corner. Miran stood frozen, his thoughts storming. He knew he should return to the human delegation at once, but his legs felt heavy. He had made a mistake, and not just a small one. He had walked into the private space of one of the most respected alien diplomats. He feared she might tell the council, and if that happened, the reputation of humans would suffer. He finally forced himself to move, walking quickly through the hallways of Valora Station. Every alien he passed seemed to glance at him longer than usual. Maybe it was his guilty mind imagining it, or maybe whispers were already spreading. When he reached the human chamber, Doran, the leader of the envoy team, was reviewing documents on a glowing screen. He looked up with a steady expression. You were gone long. Where did you go? Miran hesitated. His instinct told him to hide what happened, but Tira's words echoed in his mind.
Humans speak often of honesty.
We will see if yours is true. I walked further than I should have, Miran admitted. I ran into one of the Syrian diplomats. Doran studied him carefully. Ran into or something more? Miran lowered his eyes. It was not my place to be there. I may have offended her. Silence filled the room. Doran sighed quietly and set the screen aside. You are young, Miran. Mistakes will happen. What matters is how you face them. If the Syrian makes complaint, we will answer respectfully. Until then, stay calm. Miran nodded. He wanted to believe it would pass, but he could not forget the sharp look in Tira's silver eyes. Later that evening, the council gathered again. The circular chamber glowed with layered lights as voices rose and fell in careful patterns. Species after species spoke of trade routes, peace treaties, and territorial disputes. Miran sat quietly beside Doran, his hands folded, his ears catching every word. Then Tira entered the hall. She walked with calm grace, her robe shining under the lights. For a moment her gaze swept across the room, and it rested briefly on Miran. He shifted in his seat, but her expression gave nothing away. The Syrians spoke of balance, of keeping borders respected, of the danger of unchecked expansion. Their words carried weight, and even the strongest empires listened. When Tira's turn came, her voice was steady and clear, each word precise. Miran forced himself to stay calm, but his mind replayed their earlier encounter. He wondered if she would use the moment to accuse him, to test his people before all. Yet she spoke only of policy and peace, never once mentioning him. The session ended, and delegates moved into smaller groups for private talks. Miran thought he was safe, but then a quiet voice spoke from behind him. Human envoy. He turned quickly. Tira stood only a few steps away, her expression unreadable. Doran was busy with another diplomat, so Moran was alone. "Yes," Moran said, his voice almost a whisper. "Walk with me," Tira said. It was not a request. She turned and began moving down a side hall. Moran followed, his heart beating fast. They stopped in a quiet section of the station away from the main crowd. The walls glowed faintly and the hum of distant engines filled the silence. Tira turned to face him. "You entered my chamber earlier," she said. Her tone was calm but sharp like a blade wrapped in silk. "You saw what was not meant for your eyes. Do you deny it?" Moran stood straight. "I do not deny it. I stepped inside without thinking. It was a mistake." Her silver eyes studied him. "You admit it. Most would hide such shame. Why do you not?" "Because it is the truth," Moran said. "And because I wish to show respect even if I failed before." Tira tilted her head slightly, her gaze never leaving him. "Among my people, honesty is valued, but it is rare. We are taught to guard our words, to reveal little. You humans, you speak too openly. Some call it foolishness," Moran swallowed. "Maybe it is foolish, but I believe it is better to speak truth than to live in false silence." For the first time, a faint change touched her expression. Not a smile, but the edge of curiosity. "Strange," she said softly. "You carry shame, yet you do not hide it. You were caught in fault, yet you still stand firm. Why?" "Because hiding would not change what happened," Moran said. "Only honesty can show I meant no harm." Tira looked at him for a long moment, as if measuring the weight of his words. Then she turned slightly, her robe flowing like liquid silver. "You are different from the others," she said at last. "Most who come before me offer only polished words and hidden motives. You are unpolished, but you do not try to hide it. Perhaps that is why your kind unsettles the council." Moran felt a mix of relief and tension. "Will you report my mistake?" Her eyes met his again. "No, but you will remember this moment. If humans wish to be trusted, they must learn respect for all customs. Do you understand?" "I understand," Moran said quickly. "And I will not forget." Tira gave a slight nod. "Then we will see if your honesty lasts longer than this conversation." She turned and began to walk away, but this time she slowed slightly, as if expecting him to follow. Moran hesitated, then stepped into pace beside her. As they moved through the hall, other diplomats glanced at them, curious at the sight of a Syrian walking with a human envoy. Whispers followed in low tones, but Tira ignored them. At the edge of the chamber, she paused. "Tomorrow I will speak again. Watch closely. There may be things not said with words that you can still learn." Moran bowed his head slightly. "I will watch and I will learn." Her eyes lingered on him for a brief moment. Then she left without another word, disappearing into the moving crowd. That night, back in the human quarters, Moran sat alone at the wide window, staring out at the stars. His thoughts were tangled, but one thing was clear. Tira had not turned him into an enemy. She had tested him, judged him, and for now she had chosen to let him remain. He wondered why. Was it curiosity? Was it doubt about her own ways? Or was it something else he could not yet name? Whatever it was, the simple mistake of entering her chamber had changed everything. Their paths were now tied together, and the council ahead would not see them as strangers anymore. Moran leaned back, breathing slowly, his heart still restless. The stars outside the station burned bright, countless worlds watching silently as two young envoys of different species began to shape the course of their people. And though he could not yet know it, the next days would test both his honesty and her judgment in ways far greater than either imagined. The next morning on Valora Station began with a soft glow across the wide halls. The banners of each world shimmered in the air, and the steady hum of the station's engines created a rhythm that never stopped. Delegates moved through the passages, in small groups speaking in hushed voices, their faces calm but their eyes sharp. Moran rose early. He had not slept well, for his thoughts had been filled with the memory of Tira's silver eyes and the weight of her words. He had expected anger, perhaps punishment, yet she had chosen curiosity instead. That single choice filled his mind with questions. Why had she spared him? Why had she asked him to watch her speech closely? He dressed in the plain dark uniform of the human envoys and joined the others as they made their way to the council chamber. Doran gave him a brief nod, a silent reminder to remain steady. Moran promised himself he would not let his people down again. The chamber was already full when they arrived. Tall insectoid beings clicked their mandibles in private chatter, Massive, scaled figures folded their arms as they waited. The air carried. The tension of many powers gathered together, each guarding their secrets while pretending unity. When Tira entered, silence moved across the room like a wave. Her robe glowed faintly with woven light, each thread shining as if made from fragments of stars. She took her seat with graceful calm, her face unreadable. Yet Miran felt her presence as if a quiet storm had stepped into the hall. The discussions began again, first with trade disputes, then border agreements. Miran listened carefully, but his eyes often drifted toward Tira. She rarely spoke, but when she did, the entire chamber gave her words full attention. Then came the matter of exploration rights. Some races demanded that humans slow their expansion into newly charted systems. Others argued that humanity's energy brought fresh opportunities. The debate grew sharp. Finally, Tira stood. Her voice was steady, like water flowing over stone. The Syrian people believe growth must come with balance. We do not fear humanity's speed, but we fear its lack of caution. A flame can bring light, but it can also consume. Miran leaned forward. Her words carried warning, but also recognition. She did not dismiss humanity, nor call them dangerous outright. Instead, she framed them as a force needing guidance. She paused, then continued. Yet I have seen that humans carry something rare. They hold no walls between words and feelings. They show themselves as they are, even when it shames them. This honesty is dangerous in diplomacy, but it is also refreshing. The chamber stirred with whispers. Several alien eyes turned toward the human delegation. Doran sat straighter, careful not to reveal surprise. Miran felt his breath catch. He knew these words were meant as more than general observation. They were for him. When the session ended, delegates broke into smaller circles to argue and persuade. Miran tried to blend into the background, but once again he heard her voice, human envoy. He turned. Tira stood close, her gaze calm. "Walk with me," she said again. They moved together through the wide halls, passing towering windows that showed the endless stretch of stars. This time Miran was less afraid. His shame had faded, replaced by a growing curiosity. Tira walked with measured steps. "You watched as I spoke," she said. "Yes," Miran replied. "I listened to every word." "And what did you hear?" Miran thought carefully. "I heard that you see humans as reckless, but not hopeless. I heard that you believe we carry something worth notice, even if it unsettles the others." Her lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but close. "You listen better than most. Many only hear what they want. You heard what was beneath the words." Miran felt warmth in his chest. "You asked me to learn. I am trying." They walked in silence for a few moments, the hum of the station filling the air. Tira finally stopped near a wide viewing deck. Stars glowed across the black canvas, and far below a planet spun slowly, its clouds catching light from the distant sun. She turned to him. "Why do humans expand so quickly? Other species take centuries before reaching beyond their borders. Your kind rushed into the stars in only decades. What drives you?" Miran considered her question. "On Earth, we always looked up at the sky. We dreamed of more. Some say it is hunger. Some say it is fear of staying small, but I think it is something else. We want to see what is beyond the horizon, even if it is dangerous. We cannot help it." Tira studied him. "And you think that curiosity will not destroy you?" "It might," Miran admitted, "but it is who we are. Without it, we would not be here speaking with you now." Her eyes softened for a brief moment, then sharpened again. "Curiosity is both gift and curse. You entered my chamber because of it. You risked shame, and yet you stand here still speaking without fear. Strange." Miran took a slow breath. "Do you regret not punishing me?" Tira's gaze turned back to the stars. "Regret is for choices that weaken us. I do not feel weakened. Instead, I feel curious." The word lingered between them. Other delegates soon entered the deck, breaking their quiet moment. Tira stepped back, her calm mask returning. "Be careful, Miran," she said softly. The council watches more than you think. Some already whisper that Syrian and human walk too closely. Miran nodded. I will be careful. But inside, he felt something stronger than caution. He felt the beginning of trust. Over the next days, their paths crossed often. Sometimes in the great hall, sometimes in smaller gatherings, sometimes in quiet corners where no one else listened. Each time Tira questioned him about humanity's history, about Earth's wars and dreams, about why his people valued family, stories, and laughter even in dark times. At first, Miran answered with care, but soon he spoke with ease. He told her of rivers on Earth, of fields where children ran, of cities that never slept. She listened without interruption, her silver eyes calm but intent. In return, she shared small glimpses of her own world. Syria was a place of glass towers and flowing water gardens, where every word spoken carried weight and silence was as valuable as speech. Her people valued restraint, order, and patience above all else. Miran found the contrast fascinating. You live with silence, he said once. We live with noise, yet here we are, speaking. Perhaps that is why we are curious of each other, Tira replied. As their talks grew, others began to notice. Whispers spread through the council. Some alien envoys frowned at the sight of a Syrian walking with a human. Others whispered with interest, wondering if something new was forming. Doran warned Miran quietly, You are drawing eyes. Be cautious. A single misstep could be seen as more than your own. Miran nodded, but his heart was restless. He did not seek scandal. He only sought understanding. And Tira, for all her calm distance, seemed to seek the same. One evening, as the council broke for rest, Miran found himself alone in the quiet gardens of Valora Station. Lighted trees shimmered, their leaves glowing faintly in soft waves. A fountain sent streams of blue water into the air, falling with gentle sound. He thought he was alone, but then Tira appeared from the shadows. She stood near the fountain, her robe glowing faintly in the garden light. You walk often where silence lives, she said. It helps me think, Miran replied. She moved closer, her eyes reflecting the glowing water. You are not like the others. They hide behind masks of power. You speak too openly, yet it does not weaken you. Miran met her gaze. And you test me with every word. But I do not mind. I think it makes me stronger. For the first time, her expression softened into something close to a smile. It was faint, almost hidden, but Miran saw it. Perhaps, she said quietly, your kind is not as reckless as I feared. Perhaps there is more behind the noise. They stood in silence, the fountain's glow casting ripples of light across their faces. In that moment, the distance between human and Syrian seemed less vast, but far beyond the garden walls, shadows moved in secret. Others watched their growing bond, and not all were pleased. The council was fragile, and suspicion was never far. What began as an accident was now turning into something larger, something that could either bridge worlds or divide them even more. Valora Station glowed like a crown in the black sea of space. Inside its vast chambers, tension built each passing day. Agreements moved slowly, arguments rose quickly, and behind the polished speeches, suspicion was growing. Delegates smiled in public but whispered in secret. Miran felt the change. In the first days of the council, he had only listened, learning quietly. Now eyes followed him whenever he walked beside Tira. Some carried interest, others carried doubt. He knew whispers had begun. Whispers that a Syrian diplomat and a human envoy were too close. Doran, the human leader, gave him a warning one evening. Your talks with Tira are noticed. Some think it is strategy. Others think it is weakness. Be careful, Miran. We cannot afford to lose trust here. I understand, Miran said. But in his heart, he also knew he could not avoid Tira. Their paths were tied now. She tested him, questioned him, and pushed him to see beyond his own limits. Without her, he would still be only an observer. With her, he felt like he carried meaning. The crisis began during a late session. Delegates gathered to discuss the outer trade routes near human colonies. Voices clashed louder than before. Some races accused humans of moving too quickly, of risking war by spreading without permission. Others defended them, saying new energy was needed for the council to remain strong. Tira rose to speak, her silver eyes calm, her robe glowing faintly under the chamber lights. Balance is needed, she said. If growth comes without balance, we all suffer. But if growth is stopped by fear, we all lose. The Syrians asked the council to guide humanity, not cage it. Her words carried weight. The chamber quieted, but the calm lasted only a moment. Suddenly, the lights above flickered. A low hum filled the hall. Then, without warning, an explosion rocked the far side of the chamber. Flames burst. Smoke filled the air and the sound of alarms echoed through the station. Delegates shouted in panic. Guards rushed forward, forming walls around their leaders. Miran stumbled as the floor shook. He pulled himself up quickly, searching for his group. Doran was safe, shielded by the guards. But across the chamber he saw Tira standing still, her calm shattered by the chaos around her. Without thinking, Miran pushed through the crowd, reaching her side. "Tira," he shouted, "are you hurt?" She shook her head, her voice steady despite the smoke. No, but this was no accident. Before Miran could reply, another explosion shook the walls. The alarms grew louder. Emergency doors began to seal sections of the hall. Panic spread like fire. Then above the noise, a voice rang out from one of the alien groups. It was the humans. They brought this sabotage. Dozens of eyes turned instantly toward the human delegation. Suspicion leapt across the chamber like lightning. Miran's blood went cold. He could see the fear in Doran's face as accusations rose. It was too quick, too prepared. Someone wanted the humans blamed. Tira placed a hand on his arm, steady and calm. "Listen," she said. "This is not random. Someone planned this to weaken your people." Miran nodded, his mind racing. "Then we have to prove it." "But how?" Tira's gaze sharpened. "Evidence. The station records every breath, every step. If we can find the truth, the lies will fail. But we must move quickly before suspicion hardens into judgment." Another explosion shook the outer walls. Guards shouted for evacuation. Delegates rushed to the exits. Amid the chaos, Tira pulled Miran toward a side passage. "Come," she ordered. They moved through the empty corridors of Valora, far from the main crowd. The air smelled of smoke and red warning lights flashed along the walls. Miran's heart raced, but he trusted Tira's steady pace. "Why are you helping me?" he asked as they ran. "Because truth matters," Tira answered without slowing. "If humans are blamed for this, the council will break. And if the council breaks, the galaxy will bleed." Her words struck him with weight. It was not just about his people now. It was about every world tied to this fragile peace. They reached a control hub, a wide chamber filled with glowing screens. A frightened technician tried to seal the systems, but Tira spoke quickly in her native tongue, commanding access. The screens unlocked, revealing streams of data. Miran stepped closer. "What are we looking for?" "Security feeds," Tira said. Her silver eyes scanned the glowing streams. "Look for movements near the power lines." The first explosion began there. Miran leaned forward, his eyes sharp. Hours of recordings scrolled past. Then he saw it, a shadow moving where no delegate should have been. Not human. The shape was wrong, tall and hunched with insect-like limbs. "Here," he said quickly, pointing. Tira's eyes narrowed. "The Chiron," she whispered. "They opposed your people from the start." The feed showed clear images now. Chiron figures planting devices near the chamber walls, moving with speed before vanishing into the shadows. It was enough to prove the truth. But before they could lock the evidence, the control hub shook. A group of armed figures burst inside, their insect limbs clicking in sharp rhythm. Chiron soldiers. "Leave the records," one hissed. Miran's heart pounded. There were too many of them. He looked at Tira, but she stood calm, her robe flowing like silver water. "You want the council blind," she said firmly, "but we will not allow it." The soldiers stepped closer, weapons raised. Miran felt fear claw at his chest, but he stepped forward. "You will not silence us." He grabbed a control panel and pressed the command Tira had shown him. The evidence streamed into the council archives, locked behind codes only the leaders could break. The Chiron soldiers hissed in rage, rushing forward. Miran braced himself, but Tira moved first. With surprising speed, she activated a hidden device on her wrist. A shield of shimmering light burst outward, forcing the soldiers back. "Run!" she ordered. Together they dashed through a side exit as the shield flickered behind them. Alarms screamed louder now, and the station shook again with distant blasts. Hours later, after the fires were put out, and the delegates gathered again in emergency session, Tira and Moran stood before the council. Smoke still lingered in the air, but the evidence had been secured. The Chiron tried to deny it, but the recordings spoke clearly. Their images were shown for all to see. Their sabotage, their attempt to frame the humans, their plan to break the fragile peace. Gasps filled the chamber. Voices rose in anger, not at the humans now, but at the betrayal of the Chiron. Guards surrounded the insect-like delegates, forcing them from the hall. Moran stood silent beside Tira, his heart pounding. He knew without her the truth would have been lost. She had chosen to trust him, to act beside him, even when the galaxy turned against his people. When the council dismissed, the chamber slowly emptied. Tira turned to him, her silver eyes calm once more. "You see now," she said softly, "why honesty matters. Lies grow quickly in fear. Only truth can cut them down." Moran nodded, his voice steady. "And you see why humans cannot stop being curious. If I had not followed you, we would not have found the truth." Her lips curved slightly, faint as starlight. "Perhaps your recklessness carries value after all." They stood together in the quiet chamber, the weight of what had passed heavy on their shoulders. Around them, the council struggled to rebuild trust, but between them something new had formed. An alliance not of treaty or strategy, but of choice. The council chamber of Valora had settled into a tense quiet. Delegates from dozens of worlds moved carefully, their voices low, each step measured. The explosions and sabotage had passed, but the memory of danger still lingered. Trust was fragile, and suspicion had not yet fully faded. Moran walked beside Tira, their presence together drawing quiet attention. Many delegates whispered among themselves, curious about the human who had stood beside the Syrian diplomat in the darkest moment of the council. Some wondered if it was strategy. Others wondered if it was more. Doran followed close behind, his face calm but his eyes alert. He knew the importance of this moment. The council would decide whether humans were trusted allies or easy scapegoats. Myron understood it too. Every action, every word mattered now. The emergency session began with the council leaders reviewing the evidence. The Karen delegates, now restrained, hissed and protested, but their claims were weak. The security recordings, timestamps, and motion logs were undeniable. They had planned the sabotage, hoping to frame the humans and fracture the council. Moran watched the chamber carefully, noticing the subtle reactions of each species. Some were relieved to see the truth, others angry at the audacity of the Chiron. But all eyes eventually turned to Tira. She stood and addressed the council. Her voice carried calm authority. "The truth is clear. The Chiron attempted to destroy the council and blame the humans. The evidence leaves no doubt. If the council is to survive, it must recognize the honesty and courage of those who acted to protect it." She paused, letting her words sink in. Her gaze swept over the room, landing on Moran for just a moment. That glance alone seemed to speak volumes. "You, human envoy," she continued, "stood with me when the station was in chaos. You followed truth instead of fear. Your actions were not perfect, but they were guided by honesty. That choice matters more than any flawless plan." Moran's chest swelled. He had acted without hesitation, without thought of reward. Yet hearing Tira's recognition made him realize how much courage had truly mattered. The Chiron delegates were expelled from the chamber, escorted by guards to face judgment for their actions. The remaining delegates murmured among themselves. Slowly the council began to rebuild. Trust was delicate, but now it had a new foundation. Several alien envoys approached the human delegation. Some offered nods of respect, others quiet words of thanks. Moran noticed that even the most cautious species were now willing to consider humanity as more than unpredictable newcomers. Tira stepped close to him after the session ended. "You see now," she said softly, "why truth matters more than appearance. You could have been punished, but instead you gained respect through honesty and action." Moran nodded. "I understand. And I see now that trust is something you earn, not demand." Her eyes softened. "And you have earned it, Moran. Not just for yourself, but for your people. The council will remember this day." Days passed as the council resumed normal operations. Trade agreements were discussed, borders negotiated, and conflicts resolved. Moran worked closely with Tira, observing her decisions and learning how her people balanced authority, patience, and insight. During quiet moments, they spoke of other things. Miran told her about Earth's rivers, mountains, and cities. He described sunsets that spilled gold across the sky, and nights when stars shone like scattered diamonds. Tira listened, fascinated by a world so different from her own. In return, Tira spoke of Saria. She described crystal towers that reflected the sun in every direction, gardens that floated above the ground, and rivers that carried light instead of water. Her people valued silence, discipline, and reflection, yet she admitted there were moments when even Syrians longed for connection beyond the rules. Miran realized that they were learning from each other. Humanity's openness balanced Syria's restraint, while Syria's wisdom guided humanity's energy. It was a partnership born not of politics alone, but of mutual understanding. One evening, the two of them found themselves on a balcony overlooking the central hub of Valora. Ships moved gracefully through space, docking and departing, carrying delegates, goods, and ideas between worlds. The lights of the station reflected in the stars, creating a tapestry of color and motion. "You have grown stronger in a few days than most envoys do in years," Tira said, her voice calm. "Not because of skill or knowledge, but because of courage and honesty. These are qualities that will shape your people's future." Miran looked at her. "I could not have done it without your guidance. You taught me to see beyond appearances, to trust in truth, and to act when it matters." Her silver eyes met his, steady and clear. "Then we have both learned something. Perhaps our people can learn as much from each other as we have learned from one another." He nodded, feeling the weight of her words. For the first time, he understood that diplomacy was more than agreements on paper. It was trust, respect, and courage. The council's final day arrived. Delegates gathered in the main chamber to finalize treaties, trade agreements, and security protocols. Miran and Tira took their places side by side. Eyes followed them, but neither flinched. The lessons of the past days had strengthened them both. When the council convened, Tira spoke first. "The events of recent days have tested us all. The council survived not because of force or fear, but because individuals chose truth over lies. Humanity has shown courage, honesty, and willingness to act when the moment demanded it. Let this be remembered as the foundation for a stronger alliance between our worlds." Murmurs of agreement filled the room. Several delegates stood, nodding in acknowledgement. Humanity was no longer seen as reckless newcomers, but as partners capable of contributing to peace. Miran felt a quiet pride, but it was tempered with humility. He had acted, yes, but it was Tira's guidance, wisdom, and trust that had allowed them to succeed. After the session, Tira turned to him. "You have proven much, Miran. Not only to the council, but to yourself. How you act in moments of choice defines who you are." He smiled faintly. "And how you guide others shows who you are as well." Her lips curved in a small, genuine smile. "Perhaps humans and Syrians are not so different after all. Both of us value honesty, courage, and the bonds that form between individuals. That is what makes the difference in the galaxy." As the council broke for celebration, delegates mingled freely. Humans and Syrians exchanged ideas, forming plans for trade, defense, and exploration. Miran noticed other races approaching, seeking dialogue and understanding. The events of the crisis had shifted the perception of humanity. They were no longer outsiders. They were participants, capable of shaping the future of many worlds. Tira and Miran found a quiet corner of the station, away from the celebration. The hum of activity was distant, and the stars beyond the windows shimmered peacefully. "You know," Miran said softly, "when I first saw you in your chamber, I thought I had made the worst mistake of my life." Tira's eyes twinkled faintly. "And yet that mistake brought us here. Sometimes errors lead to truth if one acts with honesty." He nodded, understanding fully now. "I will remember that, and I will carry it with me for my people and for myself." She looked at him, her expression calm but thoughtful. "Then the council has gained more than treaties and agreements. It has gained trust between worlds. And trust begins with choices made by those willing to act honestly and courageously." Miran smiled. "Then we have done something bigger than either of us imagined." In the quiet of Valora Station, two envoys, one human, one Syrian, stood together, looking out at the vastness of space. Stars sparkled endlessly, worlds waiting to be explored, dangers to be faced, and bonds to be formed. For Miran, the journey had begun with a mistake. For Tira, it had begun with curiosity. Together they had turned uncertainty into trust, fear into courage, and suspicion into understanding. The galaxy was still vast and full of challenges. But in that moment, two species had taken a step closer, not just toward alliance but toward respect. Humanity had shown that courage, honesty, and simple action could bridge worlds. And for Moran and Tira, it was only the beginning of a partnership that could shape the future of many generations. The Council had survived. Trust had been rebuilt, and the stars, once distant and unknown, now seemed full of promise.